Hello Musicianship 5, Caitlin and Grumpybach here. So today what we're going to do is another Bach chorale video. What I'm going to do is go over the rules of Bach chorales, why they are the rules, why we should be doing these and abiding to the rules of Bach, and then finally how to avoid any of the problems that come from these rules. So what I'm suggesting that you do along with this video is maybe make a chart. What you can do is make 3 columns. What is the rule? Why is this a rule? And how do we avoid the problems associated with the rule? And then you can write them down and, I don't know, like frame them or tattoo them on your back or something. So our first rule of Bach chorales is no parallel fifths. So parallel fifths leave a very empty sound because of a lack of context. This is by themselves. See, there's no context, there's no major. Even then though, when we fill in the third, it feels like there's a distinct lack of grounding. Everything's moving in the same way, in the same direction. We're in parallel motion, not contrary motion, which is where the voices move in opposite directions. Because of this, it leaves a kind of empty, unbalanced sound. Now, in order to avoid using parallel fifths in your writing, try and make sure that the lines are in contrary motion, the soprano and the bass, when you write it, but also do make use of inversions. So if you do need a chord 1 followed by a chord 2, then, I'm pretty sure that's the beginning of a pop song, then what you do is, instead of in root position, put chord 2 in the first inversion. So I'm going to fill this out a bit more so we've got a bit more context. Now that's the beginning of Bruckner's Locus Iste. Instead of going from to chord 2 in the bass, listen to that, put it in the inversion. A lot nicer. Now this changes the timbre of it ever so slightly. It's kind of warmer, particularly because you've got the major third in the bass. Yeah, that's how you fix that. Rule number 2, no parallel octaves. Now this is for the same reason as we don't want parallel fifths. We've got an empty sound. So instead of writing a parallel octave thinking, oh, I need a lot of root in this chord, instead of that, try doubling a different note in the chord. Now we know not to double the third, we'll go into that later. What we could do instead is we can double the fifth. This is fine. So if we've got our chord 1, instead of then going to, let's go to a chord 5, but I'm going to have some octaves in in the tenor and soprano, so this is going to go, yep, so listen to that, brain time. Instead of this we can double the fifth, so instead I'm going to keep the tenor the same, I'm going to change the soprano, so now we've got 2 fifths at the top, we've got the third in the bass and then the root in the tenor. So there we go, so that's a lot stronger than what we had before, which was all moving down as well, so you feel that kind of parallel, it's all kind of a bit instead of giving it a bit more of a thicker harmonic context. So, rule number 3, don't double the thirds. Now this means the third of the chord. If this is our chord, we're in C major, then the third is the E. So if I fill out a chord, I've doubled the third here. Both E's. Now this feels kind of unbalanced. The third of the chord is what really gives the chord its context and its identity, whether it's major or minor. However, if we think about the laws of physics with regards to music. This is really referring to the harmonic series. The third of the fundamental comes after the root, obviously, which is the fundamental, and the fifth. Now, what on earth am I talking about? So, excuse me, Bach. When we hear a note, this is our note, the one pitch is made up of lots and lots of different pitches. These are the harmonics or the overtones, and these create the sound kind of in physics. So first, you don't need to know exactly how this works. You halve the string lengths or the tube lengths. It depends on what you're playing. So we have fundamental, which is C. We then have an octave, which is another C. We then have a fifth, which is G. We then have a fourth, another C. Then we have an E, and then it goes to G, a slightly out of tune B flat. It's a good job the piano's out of tune anyway, and it kind of continues like this. So we have a lot of root, fifth, root, and then the third. So the third happens last, and because the third happens last, it means it's the least important in the hierarchy of the notes in the chord. So because of this, in order to not kind of off balance onto the less important notes, we really want to be doubling the root or the fifth. That's okay. So a way to avoid doubling your third is to use inversions. Again, change the importance of the notes and the order in which they come, and if you can kind of move one of your lines to a different note, that's great. What you can do is you can double the third if you are in a first inversion. So if you've got E in the bass, then you can have your C, another E and a G. This is okay. As you can hear, it's not as strong as, but you are allowed to do it, but do avoid if you can. So rule number 4, do not have more than an octave space between the lines. This is between the soprano and the alto and the tenor. However, you are allowed more than an octave between the tenor and the bass. So again, this is because of the harmonic series and the physics of music. If this is our fundamental down here, then we get more notes as we get higher. And because of this, if all of our fundamentals, our actual kind of pitches, are all quite low, as you can hear, this sounds quite thick and quite muddy. This is because a lot of the harmonics, where they get really close together, are all kind of smushed over each other at the top. They're really kind of quite close and quite low. If your parts are more evenly spread, so let's keep a C quite low so that I can explain why it's okay to have a bigger gap between tenor and bass, and then let's have a tenor over here, so this is a very balanced chord. This is very, very nice in terms of spacing, but not in terms of my piano tuning. So we want a reasonable amount of space between, but not too much, because if we have too much space, not only does it get mushy, but also the voice leading becomes quite difficult. If you've got a soprano up here, so there's a very big gap here. Your chord could do with something in the middle to be fuller, and you're not going to add another casual part in the middle of your full part thing in order to fill it out. So what we really want here is just to keep them together enough that it sounds consistent and that they're working as a team and somebody doesn't just kind of go off. That's a very extreme example, but hopefully you're getting the point. So to avoid doing this, what you really need to do is reassess where your voices are. If they're too high in their register or too low in their register, this is where you're going to get the really big gaps between the lines.